We're really happy that you're with us tonight. It's a very special program. We have our dear friend Rick Geffken, who's been a wonderful friend to the library, has done several author talks. Several of his books actually are in the library if you'd like to come in and check them out. He's also on our Let's Talk About Race committee, and so we're really excited about tonight's program. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I do want to tell you about a couple of things that are happening at the library. If you're a regular patron, I'm really happy to tell you that our new electric doors are working, and this is a momentous occasion for those of us that have been working at the library and explaining to people why they have not been working for the last 2 months. But also our foundation on Friday, November the 11th, is going to be doing a fundraising event. If you go on our website, you'll learn more about it. You can always email me and I can get back to you. I believe tickets are $75 a piece for this event. Also, I encourage you to look at our website at all the gamut of our programming. We have a lot of programming done in the library, not as much as we were because of all the construction that's being done. We have several virtual programs. I noticed that Liz is with us. She does guided journaling. She does the book club. One is virtual, one is in-house. So there's a lot of things happening at the Red Bank Public Library. I really encourage you to come in with us and to come into the library. If you're a Red Bank resident, if you work in Red Bank, or you have a child that goes to school in Red Bank, all of them qualify to get a free library card. And we look forward to seeing you. We have a special raffle this month in honor of Halloween. And this weekend is going to be a Hogwarts party in the children's room. And trust me, it's going to be a lot of people, but it will be well worth you trying to come to the library and see all that's going on. You might even get to taste a special potion or perhaps have one sprinkled over you and you'll turn and be invisible. Who knows? Anyway, welcome again tonight. I'm going to turn the program over to Patty White, who will talk to you a little bit about Zoom etiquette.
And before we do that, I just sent you a chat with the email address.
Okay, I did send it to her, but I'll do it again, Rick.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Welcome, everyone. Just a quick reminder, we're all pretty much know how to operate Zoom these days, but just a reminder to make sure to keep your device muted in case there's any background noise or sometimes there's feedback. So to minimize that, keep yourself muted. If we do hear noise coming from someone, we might mute you from this end. However, and Rick will explain this, that he's going to want to have people unmute themselves during the talk and kind of make it interactive, but he'll explain it. And please also feel free to keep your cameras on. We'd like to see you. And Claire Phelps is our moderator, and she'll be introducing Rick. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Tonight's program is on reparations, reconciliation, and renewal in today's America. Our guest tonight, Rick Geffken, as Linda said, is a very good friend to the library. He's authored 5 books, as well as numerous articles on New Jersey history for local newspapers, magazines, and newsletters. He's a trustee of the Shrewsbury Historical Society, past president and a trustee of the Jersey Coast Heritage Museum at Sandless House, and a member of the Monmouth County Historical Association. He's currently heading up a project called the New Jersey Slavery Records Index. He's owned and operated several small businesses, taught secondary school math, was an adjunct at Ocean County Community College, and is a retired U.S. Army officer and decorated Vietnam vet. Born in Jersey City, he spent most of his life in Monmouth County. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Economics from St. Peter's University, a teaching certificate from Monmouth University, and a master's degree from Montclair State University. And welcome, Rick Geffken, and I will turn the program over to you, Rick.
Thank you very much. Let me, while I'm doing this, good evening, everyone. Let me get my PowerPoint up here for you in full screen. And hopefully you can all see that. Is that coming up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, thanks everyone. I see a lot of old and newer friends here tonight, which is terrific. I know where most of your hearts are when it comes to these issues, so it's wonderful to see it. I want to say this at the outset. I don't profess to be an expert at this topic. So what I've done is I've pulled together a number of resources that will help us, I think, not only in tonight's discussion, but for our own personal edifications as we tackle this issue. So it is going to be, as much as is feasible, on a Zoom, an audience participation program. So let us get going here. Okay. So, you know, reparations, we, of course, have to owe immense gratitude to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said a long, long time ago, okay, that it's obvious that it's, quote, America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as our citizens of color are concerned. Now, he was talking figuratively, of course, but I think as time has moved on in these last 60 years or so, it's going to be more and more substantially wrought that we discuss how to actually come across with reparations. So that's a framework there that I think everyone understands. But just to give you an idea where we're going to go tonight, I'm going to ask you questions here in a minute. We're going to ask you all, do you think that reparations are necessary? Are they the same as reconciliation? Hopefully we can get to the point where we can talk about renewing the American spirit. So with that in mind, let's talk about reparations. And I would like, if we can, we've got about 20 people. So if a few of you can raise your hand to the host, Patty or Claire or Linda, and tell me what you think reparations are or their importance. We can have a couple of people comment and then we'll go from there. Please don't be shy.
Oh, and friends, just so you know, you probably, we can't see everyone's faces when we have a screen share like this. On the bottom of your screen, there should be a button called Reactions, and you can use that to, quote, raise your hand on the screen so we can call on you.
And you can also put your questions or comments in the chat as well.
Anybody want to make a comment on reparations if they think they're necessary for people of color in this country? Nancy, I think Nancy Byron wants to make a comment.
Yeah, I think they're necessary. What, how, all of that is just totally overwhelming to think about. But as I understand from just a little bit of reading that I've done, it's a reparation is to make whole something that has not been whole for whatever reasons. We have a good idea of what the reasons are in terms of this country. I think reparations need to be made to African American for how ancestors were treated, as well as how this country has continued, the government has continued to treat people. Indigenous Americans, there are pockets of reparations that have gone on with Indigenous Americans. So at least the two communities, those communities.
Okay, and it looks like Linda DeCaro has her hand up. She'd like to make a comment.
And Kristen also.
Okay. Whoever you want to, yeah, there you go. Hi, Linda.
I'm willing.
Okay.
I think the answer is definitely yes. And if you can get a significant number of people, the majority hopefully to agree with that, then we boil it down to the three big questions. And I hope I'm not jumping the gun on you, Rick. And that is who gets, in what form, and who pays.
Excellent. Christine, I think that's a comment.
Yes,
Christine?
hi. Ditto on everything that Linda just said, with the three big questions. The mechanics of how it would work is the big how do we do this? And it needs to be done hand in hand with reconciliation, in my opinion.
Great, great. So all three of you hit it right on the head as far as I'm concerned. And so let me just give you some kind of ideas. Of course, the word reparations is rooted in repair. Okay, we need to make amends, just in general, any kind of reparations for some wrong that we've done. Interestingly, might be by paying money, or there may be other ways to do this. Let's see what I get up here next. Let's talk for a second about some successful programs to give you a little bit of a grounding. So I think we know that Native Americans, the indigenous folks that lived here before Europeans came into this continent, were varied, okay, as this image depicts, and almost to a group, almost to each individual group, I should say. When I say we, our forebears who came here, defrauded them, even though sometimes the land that they took was paid for, allegedly. But we have, over the course of a few centuries, more and more lately, paid some reparations various ways, not just in money all the time, to some Native American groups. The second group that we granted reparations to, as I think you probably do know, is that, and that number is kind of startling, but it's a big enough number, probably not even enough, to the Japanese Americans who were interned during World War II at all of those horrible camps, mostly out west. And then the other group that might surprise you is that the United States, via the Marshall Plan, made sure that some of the remaining Jews in Europe got some reparations for what they had suffered. So there are examples of reparations programs, maybe programs too big of a word, initiatives that we as a country have taken for to try to correct some historic wrongs. So my question is, that's all great. Where's the National Reparation Program to address our historic enslavement in the country? And of course, the answer is there is no such thing. There hasn't been, and to my knowledge, it's only been in the last 10 or 20 years that I've been paying attention that it's even been an item for discussion. And there are, however, although not national, some institutions that have undertaken this very, very important topic. So you may know, and I'm proud to tell you that it's in New Jersey, that the Princeton Theological Seminary some years ago decided to look at their legacy, wherein they had enslaved folks working for them in the early days. And so they've allowed some scholarships and some other things for the descendants of some of those folks. Very similar to what Georgetown did. You might know that Georgetown had a student body committee and a faculty committee, and they voted to raise their own student fees to give scholarships to descendants of people that the Jesuits of Georgetown had sold all those years ago in order to keep that university in its founding years afloat. So they made a gigantic stride in that effort. And then, of course, and you'll notice that there's an educational theme here, Harvard University recently created a Legacy of Slavery Fund for scholars and students. But the last word is important there. They were careful in their recommendations to get into direct financial reparations for the descendants of enslaved. And that's because they were smart enough to know, as we'll discuss tonight, that that gets people's hackles up really, really quickly, as I think Christine mentioned, when it comes to who's going to pay and who's it coming from and how do we distribute all that. So I think we're in the very formative days of addressing this issue that I think is vital to getting anywhere toward equity in this country. So that is that little table setting. Okay. Next question, and let's open it up again. Who should receive reparations? If you would raise your hand, and we'll see what your ideas are. This is a safe space, so don't feel that you can't pick out one particular group that you might think is owed something or not.
Sue Goldberg has her hand up.
Before you get to answers for that, I wanted to ask Rick a question.
Sure.
Those programs that were instituted by several institutions of higher learning, how are those affected by the recent Supreme Court decision to remove race as a factor in who gets into college? Are they affected at all?
I would think so, and I have not updated myself, frankly, on that, but that's a very viable question. And it's, back and forth between the Supreme Court and these other courts. So I think they're probably examining those programs as we speak. I honestly don't have a specific answer. It ought to be an easy Google search to find out if they're reevaluating them, but great question. Anyone else want to venture a stab here? Okay, so again, not to exclude any group, but among people who I believe, and most people believe, should receive reparations of some kind, are Black people in this country who can trace their heritage back to enslaved people, okay, and they may, if our government ever sees fit to do this, find themselves eligible. And what I tell my Black friends, and I think you probably all are aware, the important thing there is that they have to be able to prove, should this ever comes to be, their heritage back to the enslaved. That's going to be difficult, as we all know, for many reasons. Not impossible. I was watching Henry Louis Gates last night, and the two guests he had on, he was able to trace, with the help, of course, of professional genealogists, those folks back to their enslaved ancestors. So it can be done. So as an example, okay, just to pick out, somebody famous in New Jersey, Cory Booker has, relatives, ancestors, of course, of enslaved people. So he would be eligible on this program that is not in existence yet, that we hope does come to fruition. Also, though, let's not forget that Black people were not the only people who were enslaved in this country. And as we already mentioned a little bit, Native Americans, the people who were here for thousands of years before Europeans ever thought there was a place such as America, are probably owed too. Now, there's a group of people I didn't know much about called Genezaros, and they are in New Mexico. And this is one example of a man I found. That word derives from captured Hispanic and Native Americans who the Spanish took under their command and into slavery in the early days of the New Mexico territory. So folks like that and other Native groups, and there were in New Jersey enslaved Lenape, should also be eligible. And again, there's going to be, we hope, some kind of rigorous test to make sure that people can trace their ancestry back to those kinds of folks. And again, this is not an exclusive list. There are probably a lot of people too, that just give you an idea of who might be eligible.
Thank you, Rick. Barbara Monahan has her hand up.
Yes,
Barbara?
Sorry,
That's
I
okay.
did have my hands up. He kind of addressed it. But
Okay.
I think that in terms of reparations in America, the DNA is making remarkable strides. I mean, I was able to find the county that my lineage came from in Ireland. And I think it can be proven. Some families, some companies owned slaves and benefited by their labor. And in that case, I think that's a no-brainer. That is a no-brainer for them to make reparations to the descendants of the slaves that built their empire.
I think that's a great point, and that's only one way to look at this. So DNA is going to be increasingly more valuable. What you heard Claire introduce me to is a program, actually an online database we call the Northeast Slavery Records Index, where across the Northeast, in all the original 13 colonies, by the way, were slaveholding states, colonies, we're putting together this huge online database of any reference to any enslaved person, a slave master, etc., etc. So between that, census records, which unfortunately don't name enslaved people till about 1870, we are getting closer to the point where people can trace their heritage more easily, but that will all be determined. So we looked at that first question a little bit, and now I want to pose this. What people think about this? Are reparations the same as reconciliation? Once we give people some kind of reparations, are we reconciled? Your comments, please.
Rick, I think I just wanted to backtrack a little, if I may.
Sure.
Liz had a comment about tracing ancestry,
Okay.
which I think was pertinent to it. Liz, did you want to repeat that for us, please?
Yeah, with lack of record keeping of any sort and even accuracy in names and relationships, I still don't understand how even with DNA, it can easily be traced. It just seems like really, really impossible.
So that's a good question. I am constantly amazed when I watch Finding Your Roots on PBS, how those professionals, and we're talking money here, of course, lots of money, are able to put together census records, primary documents, and DNA to point to people's heritages. So I don't profess to be an expert on that either, but I know it can be done, and I'm sure as more and more databases come online, and as people's personal histories and their own genealogical researches come online, we'll be able to get to a lot of folks. Now, we're never going to get to everybody. I think that's probably true. But I think it's encouraging to notice that we will get to also, when I say we, I'm talking about people who have enslaved ancestors. I've been recommending for a long time now when I give my talks to friends that, write down everything that your auntie told you when you were a little kid about family history, because there's probably some truth there. So, very nice observation. But
Patty
go ahead,
has.
Patty.
Has her hand up too. Yes.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, thank you. In response to your question, are reparations the same as reconciliation? I would say not only not the same, but I can't visualize any form of reparation, whether it's monetary or otherwise, without reconciliation. And I say that based on a lot of history, let's say specifically the fact that we passed civil rights legislation, and yet racism and race-based practices seem to be embedded more than ever in certain aspects of our culture, very often without even naming race as an issue. And so without reconciliation and kind of a self-examining of our culture, reparations will be almost empty, not meaningless, but empty. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent observation, and I couldn't agree more. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Linda has
Linda.
her hand up
Linda
again.
Sakara?
Yeah, I'm up again with a comment. Very sort of the opposite of what Patty said, but I think the sense is the same. I think the goal for, I'd like to think the majority of American society is reconciliation. But I don't see how we could achieve reconciliation without reparations, because I think it would be words without action, meaningful action.
Excellent, excellent.
Liz has her hand raised too.
Go ahead, Liz.
You're muted, Liz.
I often wonder what would happen if Reconstruction had moved forward as intended. There was sort of a period of time when Reconstruction looked very positive, and then that just fell apart and the Jim Crow laws came in. And I think that's where the lack of reconciliation is, and that has continued up till today. But I often wonder if Reconstruction had continued as planned, how things would be different.
Great observation. Okay, let's those are wonderful. Let's talk about reconciliation. Okay. As you know, amnesty, forgiveness, that's got to be part of it. You know, just throwing money or land or anything at somebody and hoping that they'll feel happy about what you've done is clearly not enough. And luckily for us, many, if not all, of the major religions and a lot of other religions throughout the world have talked about reconciliation as part of their fundamental morality. And I won't read these to you, but I'm sure you know, no matter what faith you profess, that these various larger religious groups, if you will, always have aspects of forgiveness as part of healing and reconciliation. And Patty, you'll be glad that I even found something. I hope I'm right here about the Baha'i community. And this again is
Yes, that's very
not
good.
an
Thank you.
inclusive. You're welcome. It's not an inclusive list, but I think it's fundamental to human morality that forgiveness goes a long way toward making things as close to whole as they may have been for them. It looks like Sue has a question as well. A comment.
My comment was along the lines of what Patty had to say. I'm not sure what the answer is and whether, because this is a multi-pronged problem and solution, how it can be achieved, but the world seems to be moving more and more, the states do, to denying that history happened. And so paying reparations for something that many states refuse to believe and are legislating to remove from their textbooks, that to remove the things that we want to pay reparations for, I'm not sure how that gets reconciled. Does the paying of reparations or the legislation of paying for reparations for some of the people in those states to change their minds, to open their minds? I don't know, but I think it's dangerously clear that for any group that's been considered other or has been repressed for any reason, there are more and more states willing to just forget about that and forget about reconciliation of any kind.
Well, I think you're right. For years, my grown Floridian children have been encouraging me to go to Florida, and I've recently reversed the equation and said, aha, I think we better come back here while it's safe. Looks like Barbara has her hand up.
Barbara Monahan, yes.
Okay, my comment is it only takes one person. And I watch Henry Louis Gates also, and I have seen him prove to a Black person, traced right back to the plantation, and the plantation slave owner is the dad. That seems really clear cut to me. I think one person could take that case to court to begin the process. I'm talking about reparation first. I do not know how reconciliation can happen without.
So a couple of great points that both of you brought up. And it seems to me, and this is just my idea, that I think it's correct that you can make a law, any law, and people don't have to do anything about it, but it's invaluable to the process, okay? You know, people want to be what they want to be, and unless they're forced to do things sometimes, they're not going to change. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that you know, passing a law, and we've got plenty of great laws, does affect immediate change, but it does have effect over time. So again, there's no exclusivity to the solution of legal, or I should say legal remedy, but I think it's a start. Changing people's minds, as we all know, is extremely difficult. It defies logic, it defies reason. People are born with and raised in environments that cause them to think certain ways, and then they dig their heels in when they're challenged to change. But you have to start somewhere. So, excellent observations there as well. Now,
Sue
go ahead, somebody
Goldberg,
else, go ahead.
yeah, Sue Goldberg wrote in the chat that there's an interesting article about Evanston, Illinois, their attempt to pay reparations and fund them through cannabis tax money. And also Patty White has raised her hand.
Actually, Jim.
Yeah, and I see you may be bringing it up now. You know, since, you know, slavery was fairly widespread. I mean, England ended in what, the 1830s. Brazil didn't end it until 1870s. Have there been any successful reconciliation programs involving Black slavery in the last, you know, that occurred, you know, within the last couple of 100 years?
So it's a great question, Jim. And let's talk about a couple of those. So you queued it up perfectly. How about this? Okay. I think we're all aware to one degree or another of what happened in South Africa over a long period of painful time. And what those folks did, Nelson Mandela, of course, when he was alive, was very, very involved in this. They put together a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And this wasn't specifically about enslavement, although Black South Africans were certainly very, very close to being enslaved. But they made a deliberate countrywide program to address that. And it involved, that you see, a number of things. So that's one example. But to Jim's specific point, in this country, America, we have not addressed it on a national level quite yet. I'm hopeful that conversations like this that we're having tonight, and some things I'm going to recommend as we begin to talk about this to our friends, relatives, etc., is how things begin to change. Okay, when we, people who are committed to a certain belief system, start to do that. So you can read about them if you want, Jim, did you have another?
Well, yeah, I don't mean just in this country. I mean, in any country. Did
Okay.
England have any kind of reparations or reconciliation policy? Did
Not-
Brazil, did any of the other many countries that held enslaved people have do anything like what is being proposed here as a possibility?
Not to my knowledge, with the exception of South Africa, again, a little bit different scenario. But what I am recommending is a couple of books here. If you want to read about what they did in South Africa, there's a book. I'm sure the Red Bank Library has others. Remember we talked about this, okay? The German government paid a lot of money, as they should have, certainly not enough, to get some kind of reconciliation started and restitution to the victims of the Holocaust. So there are examples wherein we can probably glean some individual programs and approaches that we might think of as Americans. There's another book that you might want to invest in. I think the Canadians have done a pretty good job, okay? And there's more and more of this news every week about their truth and reconciliation efforts, particularly around the Indian residential schools, which of course we have to mention here in this country when it comes to Carlisle, so-called Indian school, and all the other forced schools, whereas American Indian children were taken and literally beaten and forbidden to speak their language and observe their traditional cultural aspects of the way they were formed. So again, what's always missing in these examples, to me, especially in this country, is that Black and Native American enslaved people in what is now the United States. We've not addressed that as a country. But there's plenty of examples really close to us that we can probably work with. Now, I want to introduce you to two people that are leading the charge, as it were, and I have to tip my hat to Linda Zaccaro here, who is a graduate of the same esteemed place. But William Doherty and A. Kirsten Mullen have published a couple of books. First one I read was On the Left, From Here to Equality, where they make a really, really strong case for reparations in great detail in this country. And then their latest book that came out in May is even more detailed. And so now, at great personal risk, I'm going to see if we can bring up their little 2-minute video and let me know if this works, and you'll hear what they have to say.
Today, I'll be talking to Duke University professor William Doherty and his partner, Kirsten Mullen, about the racial wealth gap between African Americans and white Americans, and how reparations to African Americans could help close it. He co-authored his most recent book titled From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century with Kirsten Mullen. Kirsten is a folklorist and the founder of Artefactual. Thank you both for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Who should be financially responsible for paying reparations to Black Americans?
The federal government must pay this debt. This is the entity that gave itself the authority to enslave Black Americans and to institute nearly a century of legal segregation. When we're talking about legal segregation, we're not only talking about keeping Black people separate from white people, we're also talking about nearly a century of white terror attacks on Black communities. And these were focused on primarily two different things: turning a blind eye to the destruction of Black people's property. And in some cases, the federal government was party to those destructions. So, you're talking about the seizure and appropriation of Black property. The federal government is also the only entity that has the capacity to pay the debt. So the federal government is both the culpable and the capable party and should pay the debt.
You all are arguing that the federal government should be footing the bill for these reparations, but does that mean that the cost would ultimately be passed on to the taxpayers?
Not necessarily.
We make the point in the final chapter of our book that there have been a number of recent instances in which the federal government has made huge expenditures without raising taxes. One of those instances is the substantial expenditures the federal government made to address the health crisis associated with COVID. You don't necessarily have to raise taxes to undertake these massive expenditure projects. However, you do have to be concerned about the inflationary effects of these types of projects. And what we suggest in From Here to Equality is that there are two major steps that could be taken to minimize the inflation risk. One of those steps is to spread the payment of the $14 trillion out over several years. We recommend no more than 10 years or a decade, but that would reduce the amount of annual expenditure that would be needed. And then the second thing that could be done to minimize the inflation risk is to provide people with these funds in the form of an asset that is somewhat different from a direct cash transfer, something that's less liquid, that they cannot spend entirely all at one time. This could include giving them reparations in the form of an annuity or a trust account or some type of an endowment where there were limitations on the amount that could be spent at each moment. But the key thing is that ultimately the discretion for the use of the funds must reside with the recipients. Who is eligible for reparations should be Black descendants of individuals who were enslaved in the United States. And we propose that there are two criteria that would be relevant for.
Oh, sorry, I think we lost it, right?
Yeah, the screen froze, Rick.
Okay, all right, so you know what we'll do?
Determining eligibility in this context.
Oh,
The
here it
first
comes.
of these is what we refer to as a lineage standard. An individual would have to demonstrate that they have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States of America. And secondly, an individual would have to meet what we refer to as an identity standard. So for at least 12 years before the adoption of a reparations plan or the enactment of a study commission for reparations, an individual would have to demonstrate that they self-identified on a legal document as Black, Negro, African American, or Afro-American. And we argue that this is the relevant population for reparations because this is the community that has descended from the folks who were promised 40-acre land grants by the federal government as restitution for their years of bondage. And this was a promise that was not kept. At the same time, the federal government was giving 1.5 million white families 160-acre land grants in the Western Territories under the Homestead Act of 1862. And this is the foundation for the racial wealth gap.
Why is it important that monetary reparations be made specifically to African Americans as opposed to a broader group such as Black Americans, which would include Caribbean Americans, possibly African immigrants, or expanded to the broader umbrella of people of color, which includes other racial groups as well?
So we are focusing on the descendants of the individuals who were promised those 40-acre land grants and denied them. You know, these are folks who had the promise of the opportunity to build wealth and, importantly, to pass that wealth on to their children. This is not the case of the more recent immigrants. We know that for the most part, you know, unless your family was part of the diplomatic corps, Black people from the Caribbean and from the continent were not in the United States in large numbers until the late 60s. They did not experience enslavement in this country. Their ancestors did not experience Jim Crow in this country. They did not experience nearly 100 years of racialized terror against their families in this country. Yes, it is indeed quite likely that many of these individuals have a case that can be made for reparations, but not to the United States government. But individuals who are from Antigua or from Jamaica would take their case for reparations to the UK. Our history.
Okay, so rather than go on with that, what I want to reiterate here is that these folks are, I think, the leaders in this movement. They were talking specifically about reparations, but reparations and reconciliation are linked. And if the federal government ever decides to get involved in this, then it's going to have to be a process within which it's not just giving people something. It's going to have to be a process where together groups of people in this country decide through our government and our representatives that this is something that will heal society and head it in the correct direction of our, of course, wonderful aspirations as a country wherein all men are created equal. Again, an aspirational goal we've been quite far from. So the two are very linked. But just to give you a little bit more depth of what those two folks are talking about is, and again, we don't have time to discuss all of the detail, but they claim, and I think they're right, that the U.S. government is responsible. Okay. However, without the support of the people in this country, and remember the government is supposed to represent us, that's not going to happen. So it's going to be a steeper hill than we might like. Also, it's going to have to involve their recommendation, which I think is a good one, is that the white descendants of the slaveholders have to get involved as well. Okay. You're all familiar, I think, with the Jefferson family and the Hemings family and what Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson did to create people whose descendants are now actually acknowledging their common heritage. That's an important aspect of this as well. Then you get into what's always been a stumbling block when you talk to people about this. You know, how do you figure out money? And there are ways to do it, okay, as they alluded to, okay. Net present value calculation just means what would it have meant? What was 40 acres in a mule worth back in 1866? How do you iterate that up to 2024 or beyond to try to come up with something that makes sense for people? Obviously, a thought discussion. There's other ways to do reparations. They talked about annuities and things, financial instruments that are self-perpetuating, that may be a way to give people reparations as well. They recommend something called the Reparations Supervisory Board, similar to what happened in South Africa, where they had Truth and Reconciliation Commission, who also were charged with trying to figure out how to do some of the reparations. They're also recommending, these two scholars, that there be a National Reparations Bureau. Someone's got to manage all the data to prove that people are eligible and that they get these reparations, however, whatever form they may take, in the correct way, in an equitable solution. So let's stop there for a second for comments, questions, or anything else that folks may have.
Linda has her hand up. At the
Yeah.
library.
Well, I just wanted to say, Rick, a couple things. First is, unfortunately, I left the article in the office, but you keep talking about the federal government, and right now, the way the federal government is, California has taken this into their own hands, and they've been working really hard on reparations. And while a lot of Californians are united that they agree, you know, there should be reparations, when it comes to financially, and you're talking a state that has a lot of problems, the drug problem, the homeless problems, you know, a lot of different things where money has to be spent to try to fix things, not to mention global warming and its effects on California. But Californians are, you know, very disgruntled about the financial aspects of reparations. And California is always the first state that tries to do things, and they're really struggling with this. So that was the first thing I wanted to see if you had anything to say about that. And also Barbara Monahan has something that she wants to ask afterwards. And then we have also Linda Zucchero.
Okay,
So,
well, let me have those women speak first, and then I'll see if I can address that.
okay.
Barbara there?
Yes, but I can't remember my question.
Well, what you said, have there been any lawsuits filed
Yes.
by a descendant of a slave against descendants of slave owners?
Yeah, I'm wondering if that has happened yet. It just
I
seems
don't know.
to me,
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
that's what I meant about saying it only takes one person. It seems to me the most logical place to start. I understand that the federal government will have to get involved, but I'd like to see it happen.
Linda Zucchero?
Linda Zucchero. Linda, I think you're still muted.
Sure am, sure was. First is a snarky comment, and then followed up by a question for Rick. I don't want to steal his thunder if he's got this planned, but the snarky observation is, I have such respect for the Darity Mullins combination there, but ultimately the American resident taxpayer will be the payee, because even though they went to great lengths to describe the ways that they can mitigate the inflationary effect of these enormous expenditures, they will happen. And the people who pay for inflation, as we know, because we're experiencing it, are the American people. I don't say that's a reason not to go forward. I just want to get that out there because I'm sure others are thinking the same thing. And the second one, which is a question for Rick, are you going to mention the sort of ex officio New Jersey Commission on Reparations, Rick?
I'm going to let you do that right now.
You want me to say something?
Please.
Well, I can't because I'm not knowledgeable, and this is not a New Jersey state government group. This is a separate group that's been formed up by a commission of people interested in equality and justice. And this is, I believe, the first year that they really seem to be going somewhere with holding conferences and taking testimony. So we do have a sort of grassroots movement here in New Jersey on this subject.
You know, it'd be great, Linda, and I don't know enough. I've read probably what you have too. If you have any references, and you could put it in the chat note, I'm sure we'll distribute that too. But I think it's a nascent movement that's beginning, as is what we're doing tonight, right? We're all thinking about these things. There's no question that when you bring money up, people get really, really anxious. However, for those of us who actually thought there was such a thing as COVID, nobody objected to all the free help we were getting and the shots and everything else from the government, and that was taxpayer money ultimately. So if we can build a case, and I think we all could, but if we can build a national case that reconciliation and healing is just as important, if not more, to this society than fighting, occasional epidemics or pandemics, then I think you could move the needle on it. Nobody is pretending it's going to be easy. I think what the two scholars in Duke are doing are putting out ideas, hoping that people like all of us will reach out to them, say yay or nay, and maybe come up with and we will eventually come up with solutions that are palatable. And you have to begin with that, right? Some thought leaders have to begin to talk about this with the platform that they have, books, lectures, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, so that people and go through it. But let me get back to Linda Ewell. What was your question for me? I forget what it was.
Are you talking to me, Rick?
I am.
Well, I was just wondering about California, if you had followed anything that was going on there.
Not as well as I wished I had. Although they do lead in a lot of these areas.
Yeah.
And they do have a tremendous amount of money in their budget. And I think we should pay attention to what they're doing.
Yeah.
As they should pay attention to what New Jersey's new efforts are beginning to do. You know, when you have people like Cory Booker at the national level and then local politicians here in New Jersey who may be getting behind this, I think good ideas will emerge.
Yeah.
But I often believe, always believe actually, that unless these people in political office hear from us, they're not going to do anything.
That's true.
By the way, I was surprised and happy to hear that we now have a speaker for the House.
Yeah.
We'll see if they do anything with it, but at
Mm.
least there's hope. These are all great comments, and I think it behooves all of us to begin to study what's happening out there, and as well as some books, and have discussions like this around, God knows, not Thanksgiving tables, but in our immediate families and friends, to network these ideas.
Yeah. Also,
So,
when you
go
get a
ahead.
chance, Rick, Kristen wants a link put into the chat about what you showed on the screen with William Darity.
Okay. Well, this is being recorded, right, too, as well?
Yes.
But I can do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, just to continue here as we come up on the hour, we've talked a little bit about the first two ideas, but this one is vital to me. Okay, the American spirit in all its aspirations. How do we get back to that? You know, what the founding fathers that we all, by and large, respect what they came out, at least from the documents that they came out with. How do we get back to that? I'm going to open that up before I show you some ideas. Okay, let me put it another way. It's pretty clear that in the last 30, 40, maybe 60 years, the American public has split on any number of issues, probably today more than ever on a wide variety of issues. And, you know, the next time a politician that I hear say, and the American people want, I'm going to scream once again, because I don't think they know what the American people want. They know what they want. But I think the American people want peace. I think American people want justice. I think American people, by and large, want equity. So how do we get to that point that was in our family document? Okay, while you're thinking about that, go ahead.
Yeah, Rick, honestly, and I suppose this sounds a little simplistic, but there really is no substitute for beginning here at the grassroots level, where not only we talk, but we listen. We listen to what others have to say. We reserve judgment. We don't necessarily criticize and comment and edit every single thing that a person says, but just listen. And beyond that, even get to know each other and nurture friendships, and do this, you know, as much as possible with real live people.
So I have a really good idea. Why don't we get a national law that gets rid of X and Meta and all these other social media that have done nothing, in my opinion, but separate us more into our little silos. I'm obviously being facetious. That's never going to happen. But I think people are tired of a lot of it. And I don't know that it's simplistic. I think what we're doing tonight, and evidence in this little image here, is really what happens. You know, everybody on this call is here because they're interested in this topic, and everybody here has a great idea. Some of you have voiced those ideas, and I think that's where it does begin. It is a grassroots kind of renewal effort. Remember, what's renewal about? And this, to me, when I read this, was great. You know, repairing something that's worn out. God, aren't we all worn out over the last 20 or 30 years of this horrible decline in our country's values, it seems to me. And we're broken. Our spirits are broken. You know, because of all of these issues. There's a couple of kinds of renewals that I want you to keep in mind. You know, there's the real personal renewal, ethnic renewals, if you will. You know, as it's evidenced by what we did to enslaved people and their natural and native African cultures, and what we certainly did to the Native Americans, right, is to try to destroy their ethnic identity. You know, I don't know that anybody can come up with a program that's going to renew that, but I know that individuals are doing that. I mean, all of the Black Lives Matter initiative, when you peel away the anger and everything else, it's really about coming to grips with oneself. And I think that's very important. It's also very threatening to people who don't believe that's a valuable thing. But it has to come from within on one level. And then there's the national arena. Okay, it seems to me that with the Supreme Court in the last several years, among other things, not to mention various presidential pretenders, that civil rights has taken a step back from, you know, the glory days that we all, those of us who were alive and around then in the 60s saw, when it was a time of hope and you know, when Martin Luther King was active, and we all know what happened in those years. But it seems in the last few years we've taken steps back. But we need to address that, you know, and we can be as selfish as we want as Americans to want our Amazon boxes showing up on the doorstep every day. But at the same time, none of us thrive spiritually and morally and even psychologically as well as materially unless everybody feels they have a fair shot. Okay, and obviously everybody doesn't have a fair shot. I hate to say that, but I think that's probably true. And I don't.
Excuse
Yes.
me, Rick, did you mean to keep this picture up on the screen? Or were you?
Has it stopped again? Okay.
Oh, no, I was just wondering if you had a different screen you were.
What are you seeing now? Are you seeing?
We see William Dare, the picture of the two authors.
I don't know why that happened again.
In the video.
I'm advancing and you're not. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, just maybe you have to hit stop share and try again.
Do that, and I'll try to share again. And let's see if this comes up. Did a renewal screen come up?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know that. I don't necessarily advocate these two groups, but I just looked briefly, and there are any number of groups that have been formed across the country. Let's talk about race is a good one, obviously. And there are two here that you might want to look into just to get ideas. I'm not advocating everybody join every group that they can, unless you want to, of course. But there's ideas out there that we can incorporate into our own localities and our own lives. So that would be something that I would certainly recommend. So just kind of finishing up here, if I can, hopefully this next screen will come up. And let's talk about this in whatever time you want. As an individual, what do you think you can do now that you have some idea of some of the issues that we face? So fire away.
Well, let me just say, you know, we can look at things that have been happening and feel a little depressed, but Rick, your friend that you did your bus trip with, Miss Gilda Rogers, when I look at what has been done with the T. Thomas Fortune House in the town of Red Bank, thinking how that building was about to be destroyed and what happened as a result of Gilda and building that museum now and how the T. Thomas Fortune is functioning and all the people that are volunteering now for T. Thomas Fortune. And in fact, they have a big exhibit that's opening this Friday night. It really does give you hope. Like we can look at things, oh, things are bad, but the thing is as you take one step forward, a lot of people get frightened. They don't really want to admit what happened in our history. And maybe it's a choice, but I'd like to believe that there are more people that really are united about what's going on as far as reparations and things. And they might not use their voices the way people are that are going against these things. But I do think there are a lot of positive things happening. I look at where things were, even in our communities, they're becoming, white. Monmouth County is a very white community. And now in many neighborhoods, there's a bit more diversity than there was. I mean, it's slow in coming for sure, but there are changes. And I think all of us, like we've talked before in this program, just going to a restaurant that isn't a white American restaurant, giving your money to businesses that are multicultural, whether it be a restaurant, whether it be, a clothing. There's so many things online where you can actually buy from individuals and other countries, that maybe they're African countries, whatever. But I think that individually in our own little world, we can do a lot to change things. And
I think you're absolutely right. I'm gonna give a lot of credit to Let's Talk About Race, which is what, 8 years now? How long have you been doing it?
9. We're in our
9 years.
Yep.
Bringing all kinds of people together. I mean, look at the people on this call. At the what she's referred to, by the way, Gilda Rogers and I have done a series of tours sponsored by Brookdale to Black historic sites in Monmouth County. And some of those folks that were on Friday's tour are on this call tonight. And what I mentioned to those folks was that I know from my travels around the state with my various talks that there are an awful lot of people doing what we're doing tonight about an awful lot of really vital topics. And I like that. I like the fact that as individuals and as small groups, people are just tired of the status quo and trying to get together. I mean, I'm looking at, 8 faces here, and I know some of the names of people who chose not to be on video. This is a really mixed group tonight. Yeah. And I'm proud of that Let's Talk About Race has always had those kinds of groups, as did our tour the other day, as does any number of organizations that I know about, not only in New Jersey, but in Monmouth County. So there is a groundswell. Maybe that's too much of a leap, but there are groups of people doing what we're doing, and that is what will change things. Yeah. How long? I don't know. How serious will the politicians take us? My belief is they won't take us seriously until we tell them we want them. Linda Powell is a real friend of ours here in Monmouth County, and he's got the message. And there's any other number of good people. And let's face it, we're in New Jersey, so we're a little bit privileged, where people get behind us. But hey, if California does it, New Jersey does it, the other 48 states will have to follow out, right? And Michael, did you have a comment, or I saw you?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody else want to please say something?
Could I just say one other thing? I was at the African American Museum in Washington about a week ago. For those of you that have not been there, you really do need to go. But there were a lot of white people at that museum, and many of them were sobbing. So, I mean, I do feel nothing can be changed unless Caucasians, white people are, in this to try to change things. But I feel like, that is definitely happening. Certainly not as quickly as we would like. And that you've got a lot of people that are filled with hate, that are afraid of their world changing. But as you said, if you make this an important issue to those in politics, then perhaps things can change.
Patty put in the chat, the National Center for Race Amity is working towards building on the other history in the United States of friendship and collaboration. And in the chat, Sue Goldberg has put a couple of articles for your information also.
And I'll give you another example. Nancy Byron's on the call tonight, and she's got a group, Diversity and Equity at Seabrook. Hope you don't mind me saying where you live, Nancy. And that is a group of folks that are doing all kinds of amazing things too.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as what we're doing tonight, as talking and idea sharing. And I'm a big believer in I talk to my grown kids in Florida all the time about a lot of stuff, but I do talk about this kind of impactful organization, if you will, and how there's more hope here than they may be experiencing, certainly in Florida. So we can all do that. We can all do that. And e pluribus unum, right? It's got to start somewhere. Other comments?
Sue also put in the chat a really interesting discussion of personal reparations versus national reparations, with comments by historian William Darity, who we've seen in the clip tonight, AmericanMagazine.org, and that's also in the chat for anyone interested.
I know that we all have a tendency to see what we're interested in, but I see this topic of reparations, reconciliation, renewal virtually every day in something. I'm reading, I'm looking at, I'm thinking about, and I'm not the only one, obviously. So this is coming to the fore, and we as a group, a small group here in Monmouth County, can affect change, and it will take longer than we all want, but here we are.
It will take it. And Barbara Monahan said that it just takes one person, and taking small groups and small grassroots efforts. The thing that I get concerned about and that you hear is that a lot of people, they're in denial, and they keep referring to the past, saying, well, this happened a long time ago. Why are we still worried about it now? And that's just such a sad idea, in my opinion. That go ahead.
And that's what people like Ron DeSantis are doing. Okay,
right.
They want to keep people from knowing things, because if you know something, then you have the power to change.
Then you have power,
right? And they don't want that. But you know what? He'll be gone. He's toast. He's toast anyway, as far as I'm concerned. But that's just my personal opinion. But other people will emerge. I mean, I have a lot of faith in Ginger Powell. I think he's on the right in a lot of issues. He pops up all the time at these kinds of events, and he's just one. And so he's been listening for a long time to people, now his constituents, and there are lots of people like him. So I agree. It's it's one chess piece move at a time. Other comments, objections?
Patty?
Thank you. I've mentioned, I think this in this group before. There's a man named Daryl Davis, who's a Black musician, who has made, I guess, a side career of befriending Klansmen, Ku Klux Klansmen. And I would recommend, go on YouTube, and, you can see one of his short videos. They're about 20 minutes long, where he tells the stories of having conversations. And his approach is to just, he says, how can somebody hate me when they don't know me? So he approaches people and he just listens to them. And some of these folks will just tell him very matter-of-factly, oh, you're a nice guy, but you're really not as smart as white people. You're not as this, you're not as that. And he just listens and well, and sometimes he does counter their arguments, but he treats them as fellow human beings with kindness and respect. He gets invited to these Klan rallies. Anyway, over the years, at least or over 200 of these Klansmen have renounced their membership in the Klan and have turned their robes over to Daryl Davis. So he now has a collection in his closet of robes from former Klansmen. But my point being, that's an example of one person who is just, crossing what could be a very dangerous line for him personally, nevertheless. So what's to stop the rest of us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in-
Linda Zuccaro here. I have to sign off, but I want to thank you, Rick, because I think this has been a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Linda.
Thank you for coming, Linda.
And Barbara Withers says she lives at the atrium, and they have a DEI group creating programs to celebrate Heritage Months and explore food of different groups. Food certainly brings everyone together.
It definitely does.
Anyone else have a comment, thought, you want to share? So again, I want to thank everybody tonight, and these are talking about food for thought. Okay, I think it behooves all of us as individuals to say, what am I going to do? And we can do that a lot of ways, and it's as simple as one-on-one, talking to people, and aligning with people who you believe have similar values. And the goal for me personally is to do that. I made a decision several years ago that it's very easy for me to get negative. All I have to do is turn on the news at night. I can't avoid that. I want to be up on what's going on, but at the same time, I want to hang around and put efforts into the renewal of our spirit with groups like this. And these are, all of you are people I value, who I know, of course, and hopefully get to know the rest of you. And I think we all have that ability.
Yeah.
So, thanks again. And Red Bank Public Library, just go in there and give them a hug. They're such good people.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. And this is definitely a spirit renewing evening, and just the discussion. And Christine Banaco wanted to also thank you once again, Rick, for leading the discussion. She put that in the chat.
Thank you.
And before you go, I just want to say, well, two things. One, use your voice. When you're with people that are talking negatively, you don't have to be negative back. You can say something positive. Follow the example of Daryl Davis, because he truly is. I personally think he's an angel, because I don't know how he keeps his mouth shut when he goes to these Klan things, but he does. And also our November program is going to be on beauty and race. We'll be talking about hair and skin lightening and things that are done that are very harmful, but to achieve the European idea of beauty is something that America's been doing, and all across the world has been doing for many years, with great detriment to the health of many people. So our next program, I also want to make it known that Rick has volunteered his time to do this program tonight, as almost everyone has done during 9 years of Let's Talk About Race. That's truly incredible. So it shows you just how much this program means to a lot of people. Thank you very much for a great evening. Any questions, you can always email me at the Red Bank Public Library. And we'll see you next month. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.